Welcome back, friends. We're looking at what liturgy did our Blessed Lord do at the Last Supper, and what would Peter have done? That's kind of the idea, the Eucharistic liturgy pre-Constantine. And we looked very briefly at the Old Testament. Now we're going to, Father will take a look at the Father Maker will take a look at the Talmuds, because they'll help us to understand some of the archaic practices that were going on at that time. The Babylonian Talmud is written about 200 to 500 AD, and the Jerusalem Talmud is about 400 AD. Though they trace back to the time of the Old Testament kings through, and I underline, reliable oral tradition. They are non-biblical, so they're not inspired as opposed to the Old Testament. They were written before and during the time of Christ, and it explains, and they explain and supplement Moses' Torah, the written word, and the temple ceremonial. The Babylonian Talmud, the Tract of Yoma, described in minute detail temple worship of Day of Atonement, which we'll come to think of as the Mass. That's going to feed into the Mass, the Day of Atonement. Jesus and the apostles would have been very familiar with the ceremonies of both the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Breads. Jesus, so here comes the answer to the title. What did Jesus do? Jesus interwove the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. I quote Father Mager. The Passover celebrated the first night, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, held each night during the week, were emblematic of the Church, the Messiah's kingdom, and the Eucharist. On the liturgy of the Last Supper, they, the apostles, founded new rites, liturgies of the Mass, which were handed down by word of mouth till they were later written down. And that's going to kind of be a point that Basil, though he's post-Constantine, but not by much, he's going to say the same thing, that these were mysteries handed on from the apostles. And these were in the languages of the people. So that's going to be one question we're asking ourselves. What was the language of the Mass that Peter said, offered it in? So the apostles followed the lesson God gave the Jewish ceremonial and worship. Justin Martyr, for his first apology, clearly shows the details of the Mass. While history is silent on the details of the Last Supper, the Jewish rites of that epoch give insight. And so Father will state, the Mass with its ceremonial comes directly from the Passover and indirectly from the temple. Although we find temple ceremonies in the Mass and in our church ceremonial, yet we trace them directly to the Last Supper, which Christ and his apostles held that night as the Hebrew Passover. So Father will make an assertion. He will say, the liturgy of the Passover formed of prayers, psalms, chants, anthems, directions, rubrics, etc., were the foundation on which the apostles, apostolic men, and great saints formed the 54 different liturgies of the Mass. That part's true. I'm not so sure that part of the quotes and assertion. I think that part's true. The most famous, the Roman Rite, established by Peter in the Eternal City and with little change, comes down to us as the name of the Latin or Roman Mass. And the original language of the Mass by St. Peter was Syro-Chaldaic, written in Antioch. So a summary of his work will be, when Peter went to Rome, he would have spoken and worshipped in the language the people worshiped, which was Latin. And Rome being a seat of primary importance due to the martyrdoms of Peter and Paul, as well as the hub of the ancient world, set a pattern copied by other new Christian communities. So it's going to be his contention, though it's going to be his contention that Peter would have offered the Mass in Latin. We'll come up, there'll be another scholar of the same period, Father Fortescue. He's going to have a different conclusion than that, though. Thoughts, insights?
Yeah, one thing that really did come to me now that you brought up Fortescue. Fortescue, of course, never left England, and Meagher went to the Holy Land. Meagher was on site, talked to many rabbis. It's much like Fauci giving us all this medical advice and never having seen a patient in 30 years, and yet all these other doctors seeing patients and giving their opinions based on treatments given. So I put much more weight on Meagher because he was there. He talked to all these rabbis. He got all this evidence and then wrote his book. Whereas Fortescue was much more reliant on a scholarly view rather than both hands dirty and scholarly view.
That is an excellent point, and it's one that I didn't understand. So I thank you for bringing that to our attention. Because Fortescue, part of what we do here, Father, is we try to encourage people to read. Another archaic practice. So I wave books. That's my activity, my action plan. With Fortescue, I'm gonna just have to wave my Kindle because I don't have a hard copy with him. Okay, I talk about in my notes. I explain why we're stopping at 3:11. So we've already covered that. So let's go straight into Fortescue since he's on our minds. He was an English priest, as father from England, as Father will say. PhD. His level of scholarship was so exceptional that he was awarded a triple doctorate, which was presented by Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria. He was a professor of church history at St. Edmund's College, oldest Catholic school in England. His sources, and since I had some other, scholars and professors send me some work too. So sometimes I will round out a little bit what Fortescue will say with some other sources clearly cited in my notes, but we're following his outline. And it's going to be the New Testament, Clement of Rome, the Didache, Ignatius of Antioch, Justin Martyr, Irenaeus of Lyons, Tertullian, Origen, Cyprian of Carthage, and Basil, with the notation, we all know he's after Nicaea, but he has that very interesting quote about the mysteries handed on, unwritten mysteries handed on. Father, we might stop here. It's just a little short, but it will go straight into the New Testament, the Gospels and the Epistles. Okay. Do you have any other thoughts before moving to that?
No, there's I was trying to figure out where it was. It was 3 or 4, but I think it's book 3 of Durandus. Durandus was an important Italian a father of the church. Well, not necessarily a father, but father of the Mass and the liturgy. He lived in the 13th century, and that I think it's his volume 3 was on the liturgy. It's either 3 or 4. I have that book on order. I've not read it, but I've seen quotes, incredibly deep insights into the Mass itself, not necessarily the origin of the Mass, but he has a lot of good commentary as far as affirming that all the rites of the church were of apostolic origin.
Yes. Excellent. I was making notes. I'll look for that. All right, my friends, we're picking up with our blessed Lord, in the next episode. Till then, Fide sed ratio.